Welcome to episode 139 of the Lone Hockey Podcast, where today we're going to be talking about some standouts in last night's match between Vancouver and Ottawa. Very physical game, very back and forth game. It was really interesting considering the fact that Quinn Hughes got tossed first period, something you don't usually see that often, and something that didn't really seem to impact the Canucks. They seemed to play better without him, ironically, and they played better without him in this game, and they ended up winning 4-3. So we'll start with some Vancouver standouts. And so Jake DeBrusk looked really good in this game. I thought he looked really good as a power winger, really good handling the puck, really good handling the contact, and just overall looked comfortable with the puck in his stick. I felt like that was a really good sign to see from him. And he's been trying to get going a little consistently thus far. And obviously, he was signed to a big deal in Vancouver to start his tenure there, but at the same time, really good game from him. And there's times like this where he does pop and he's able to impact games and be a true play driver on his line as a winger. So that's really important when it comes to his play, and maintaining that consistency is going to be the main thing when it comes to him. And overall, he looked good. Elias Pettersson looked really good once again. Unsurprisingly, he's been one of their best players, one of their most dynamic players from quite some time. And yesterday, he looked really good as a passer, looked really comfortable distributing the puck, looked really comfortable finding lanes, and looked really comfortable and being able to generate offense from an overall perspective. And he looked really good. He looked very physical in this game, which was a little untraditional. I remember he had a few big hits on some of Ottawa's better players. Like in the first period, he had one on Stutzla, and Patterson was throwing around some of his physicality in this game too, showing that grit, that tenacity, and sometimes that's noticeable, sometimes it's not. But he's mostly relied upon for his skill for obvious reasons, and looked really good yesterday. I was really surprised with his ability to showcase that physicality, but at the same time, with his skill in being able to balance those two at the same time. I thought Teddy Bluger had a good game as well, and Kiefer Sherwood, two similar style players. They play more of a bottom six, middle six style role. They can move up and down the top nine when necessary. And two guys who play with speed, they forecheck with speed. They have two-way elements to their game. They can box out guys defensively. They can stay goal side above pucks, and they're both wingers as well. So two very similar players. Bluger had a goal, and Sherwood with a multi-point game with a goal and assist. And both were really key players for Vancouver in this game. And then Connor Garland. I've always liked watching Connor Garland play because I'm slightly a little bit more biased towards the smaller, skilled, shifty players per se, especially the forwards. I feel like Garland's one of those guys who's really slick with the puck. He's really slick with his feet and might not have the dynamic level skill that he had when he was in Arizona compared to now. But I feel like with Garland, he's still a guy that's noticeable, shift in, shift out when it comes to possession driving sequences and playmaking. And he's very noticeable as a slick playmaker who can make a first pass really well. He can make lateral plays really well. I feel like there's times where he can delay a bit, and he does a really good job delaying to the point where he can create space for himself and then open up a pass lane. So really skilled as a passer and a playmaker, and I feel like that's the biggest attribute when it comes to his game. And then I thought Eric Branstrom actually played decent hockey against his former team, and it was a good showing for him. And he was noticeable as a transitional carrier, as an ozone carrier. I thought his ozone playmaking was noticeable, and he didn't have any points in this game, but I felt like he was a standout, especially considering the fact that he was playing his former team. He wanted to make an impact, and he was able to make some degree of impact in that sense as well. And so on Ottawa's side, Drake Batherson had a really good game. I always notice him when I watch him, and then when I turn on Ottawa games, I always notice him more as a goal scorer. This game, ironically, I noticed him more as a playmaker and as a pass first player. So Batherson has the luxury of being a dual threat player, so he can do both. And throughout junior hockey and throughout the early stages of pro, he was more of a playmaker who had a really good shot, but I feel like now that's really changed in some ways. I feel like we're going to see his scoring and his goal scoring continue to evolve, especially around the net from afar, being able to generate shot volume from interior. I feel like a lot of those things are going to continue to evolve when it comes to his game in the NHL. And obviously, he's been a really, really underrated player for them, really underrated player throughout the league as well in terms of his ability to drive play, both at even strength and on the power play. So analytics and the eye test certainly match up when it comes to Batherson and talking about him. and was really fun to watch in this game. I noticed some physicality elements from him as well. Claude Giroux had a multi-point game and just a very consistent player for them. Very consistent and a guy who came to Ottawa and like I said before, I believe I said this on previous podcasts when I talked about him. But if you just got the leadership ability out of him, that would have been one thing. But he's brought both leadership and scoring to Ottawa. So he's been a point per game guy. He's still been able to maintain that. Part of me thought when he joined Ottawa via free agency, I thought his scoring would dip a little bit, especially since he's 35 plus now in age, and it hasn't. It's continued to blossom, and he's continued to showcase that point per game skill that he had in Philly for such a long time. And he looked really good all around. I feel like I've noticed him consistently when I watch Ottawa games. I feel like he's a guy you notice him in terms of subtle impact, and even if he's not scoring sometimes, you still notice him in terms of him making plays and him being available for his teammates and him being a puck support guy. And I noticed a lot of the little details from him, even when he's not scoring. But he had a multi-point game yesterday. He was generating shot volume. He looked really good all across the board. Josh Norris looked really good. I was impressed with his ability to get into the play. I feel like I've seen a lot more fearless ability from Norris. Maybe some of it has to do with the mental side of injuries, dealing with so many injuries thus far, and maybe he's dealt with less fear as a result because he's like, what I have to lose? I've been injured so much now that to the point where I can just play. And it just kind of frees him up a little bit, I would imagine, to the point where now I watch him, he has a little bit more of an attack mentality, which is really good to see, especially from his goal scoring perspective. As a playmaker, he's always been a pass first player. And ever since he was drafted, he's been more well renowned in that sense. And a guy who I'm curious to see if he evolves as a goal scorer as well throughout the NHL and how he continues to evolve with his scoring habits. Jake Sanderson, unsurprisingly, I've been impressed with almost every game I've watched them. And Sanderson, I've noticed in terms of two-way play, transition ability to carry the puck offensively, walk the line, hold his ground defensively with his stature and his size and his center of gravity and plays much bigger than I believe he's 6'2" or 6'3". He plays much bigger than that. Plays like he's 6'4" or 6'5" with his physical frame and how rounded out he is in his frame, and at the same time how mature of a game he plays. I feel like those elements really allow him to look like he's 6'5" or 6'6" out there on the ice. Really stood out all across the board. He's been really impressive to watch, and he's going to be an impressive involvement over the course of time in the league as well. Tim Stützle, I noticed him a lot early on in the game. I feel like some of it dropped off towards the latter half, but early stages of the game, his puck support and his detail and his ability to make close range passes was really, really well executed. And as the game went on, it kind of faded a little bit. But early on in the game, he was competing, he was handling pucks, he was moving pucks with speed, he was shimmying guys, he was faking guys out, doing a lot of different things that Tim Stützle does when he's at his best. And I feel like this is another season we're going to see a 90 plus point year from him. He just looks so good. He's controlling pace, he's controlling play, he's controlling every facet of the game. And that's what you want to see out of your star players. And that's what he's brought. And he's consistently brought that. Brady Tkachuk, outside of the penalty that he had in the third, which is not a good penalty at all. Of course, you're going to notice him in terms of physicality and tenacity. Like those are obvious. But with Kachuk, I notice his ability to be a guy who can move pucks and absorb contact. I always am really impressed by his ability to absorb contact and still make a play with the puck. I feel like that's one of the more underrated components to this game because you see the physicality and sometimes it can go over the line, but with his ability to handle contact and how fearless he is with contact, it's similar to his brother, Matthew. But when they absorb contact, he's able to just go into guys and he doesn't really get too phased by it. So if there's a situation where he's under pressure, it's a one-on-one, he doesn't have the fastest ability with his hands. He doesn't have the fastest ability with his feet. But with his ability to handle that contact and absorb the contact, it makes it look as if he's really controlled under pressure. So I feel like that's an underrated ability of his. I feel like it slightly goes unnoticed, like I said, because of the physicality aspect of his. He's always super physical. He's always trying to create something. And for good reasons, like you want your best players to do that, but at the same time, it can go over the line sometimes, but I'm sure he's aware of it. And at the same time, he looked really good all across the board. I've always been really impressed with his game. I remember watching him at the not at the 2018 draft, but throughout his draft year, and I wasn't sure what he was going to be. I knew he had a good World Juniors, and he's super talented there. I just wasn't sure how he was going to pan out as an NHLer, but clearly he's panned out really well. I was a little low on him then, but clearly I was proven wrong, and I'm glad I was because he's really turned into a hell of a player who's really exciting to watch and really exciting to watch all across the board. And some really good standouts on both teams in this game as well.